Do you see this?
Got it.
Hi, everyone. Rose Cabral here. I'm so excited to have you all here for our monthly class. This month's class is about aligning your stars for home ownership. And I am so excited to welcome Sydney Jones to our class. I'll share a little bit about Sydney. Sydney is an astrologer and a cartomancer. Maybe Sydney will have to tell me what that is. An artist, an educator, a lifelong student, a lover of history, fashion, permaculture, psychology, and crafting. Sydney is also a spiritual activist, musician, visual artist, educator, and community builder. And so I definitely want to welcome Sydney. And then what we're going to be talking about tonight is astrology. And I'll just give a quick definition of astrology. It's the study of the movements and relative positions of celestial bodies, interpreted as having an influence on human affairs and the natural world. And so I thought it would be fun to look at how astrology impacts um, us related to our homes and the spaces that we choose to live in. And so Sydney is going to take us on a little journey through all of that. So welcome, Sydney. And
Thank
also,
you.
it's Sydney's birthday. So happy
Ah,
birthday.
yes, it is my solar return. Thank you so much. And a cartomancer is just like a fancy word for a tarot card reader. I can also read playing cards, so that's why I say that. Yeah, anyhow, I was really excited about this topic because the fourth house is really interesting, and I'm gonna start sharing my visual with you here. Thank you for your patience while I get into present mode. I thought it was ready to go. Here we go. Um, so, astrology and the home. Um, the fourth house is really what we want to look at when we are considering our home because that is what it rules. So when we look at the fourth house in our chart, it gives you insight on not only what your home life was like during childhood, because that often informs what we find comfortable now. Time is an interesting thing, but it also shows how these experiences, yeah, formed our values and preferences, and they give insight into not only how we would like to decorate our home or benefit from it, but also what kinds of houses or locations would benefit us most based on that placement. So the fourth house rules the house you grew up in, our heritage, our family traditions, who we are when no one is watching, and where we go to rest. So it's this very quiet, internal, like return kind of space in ourselves. So how do we find it? If you pull up your astrology chart, which you can easily do by Googling free astro chart, it'll take you to astro.com. You'll put in the day, time, exact time, and place that you were born, and then it will pull up what's called a natal chart. And when you look at your natal chart, you'll see that there's this horizontal line, and usually it's labeled with numbers. So you're just going to go to the fourth house right here, which is home, right? So there's these different, each slice of pie that we have rules a different part of our life. And the fourth house is our home and also the private part of ourself. Um, so Aries in the fourth house. Aries, it has a dynamic and sometimes restless energy. People with this placement would be well suited living in busier neighborhoods next to popular establishments. And they probably will also be a type of person that enjoys like having something to work on continuously, like a physical project. So a fixer-upper might not be out of the question for them because they're like a very physical sign when they go home and they want to move, kind of. Because of that, it can be hard for them to slow down and settle. So people who live with them might be like, "Whoa, you're so restless." So having a place to really like relax and cultivate that sense of disengagement is important. And as you see, I have this image chosen because they didn't even make the bed. They're just like, gotta go. So yeah, that's Aries fourth house. Um, Taurus fourth house. So Taurus in the fourth house seeks safety and comfort in their home. They are known for their love of sensual pleasure and material comfort. So they're probably going to have like really nice appliances and like pretty plants and like soft texture things. They're not going to have something that's uncomfortable but stylish. It's got to be stylish and comfortable. So since Taurus rules the fourth house, this is extra pronounced in these people. It's in its domicile or its home. So their home must be cozy, attractive, and peaceful. Peaceful is very important. These people probably like hosting family and friend events, so having plenty of seating and or a guest room is likely important to them. This is also true for Cancer fourth house, which we will get to. Oops. Oh, it's not letting me go for it. There we go. All right, Gemini fourth house. Ugh, love that home library. So Gemini fourth house people get a lot of their sense of self and that kind of personal validation from their academic pursuits and hobbies. So their house tends to be a place where they can tinker and learn. So having different like places to do projects or like a library or like an entertainment center that's not just for chilling, but for like learning is like probably pretty important for these people. They yeah, I would enjoy a home library more than the average person, probably, if they can sit still and read. And this type is might be less likely than others to even buy a house in general because they can be on the restless side and be more open to moving and having alternative lifestyles. But if they do buy a house, it's important that it's somewhere that they can feel like they can focus and also not feel trapped. So maybe living close to a freeway or like, yeah, being able to move would be important physically. um, so Cancer fourth house. My roommate has this and she's so cozy. So similar to the Taurus fourth house, Cancer people love it cozy. Emotional safety is very important to them. So it might be a priority for them to live close to their family. And it's really important for them to like their neighbors. So Cancer people are very driven towards community and like your clan, that can be a negative or a positive thing because they can be a little bit insular. But like if they live close to people that they don't feel safe with or know, that's going to cause them more anxiety than the average person. So knowing who you live around and having a relationship with them is important. So this placement also has a low tolerance for noise and excessive activity, and they benefit from quiet and serene locations. As far as interiors, these people really excel at making inviting and relaxing environments. Like it's that home you go to where you're like, oh my God, like this is the coziest. I just want to sit down and like take my shoes and coat off. Like the person probably has a Cancer fourth house. They also usually offer you food. um, Leo fourth house. Okay, so Leo fourth house people take a lot of pride in the decoration of their home and really shine into interior decorating. Leo is the sign of art and self-expression and creativity. So when it's in the fourth house of home, that's their canvas, right? So these folks do best when they live with people who are willing to defer to their choices of decor because they can be a little bit headstrong about their taste, but they're usually right. So, living somewhere that they find stylish, where they can showcase their artistic flair and host their friends is an important factor in choosing a home. So yeah, a Leo fourth house is not likely to not care about what their house looks like. They want it to be impressive and a representation of themselves. Virgo fourth house. Okay, love that. I wish I had this placement. So Virgo house, fourth house placements thrive in environments that are clean and functional. They tend not to have like any extra stuff that they don't need. People with this placement tend to prefer minimalism in their interiors and are likely quite adept at keeping gardens or houseplants. They also tend to be really organized and have very intentionally chosen objects and are really likely to want you to take your shoes off at the door. This is something I've found often. So meaningless decor or clutter might be pretty stressful for these folks. And they have a system. Like these people really have like everything is on a program. Not like these things can be mitigated, of course, but generally speaking, that's the archetype of what this would embody. As you see in that interior, lots of plants, basically no extra stuff, very minimal, kind of clean lines. Libra fourth house, super fun. So Libra fourth house people have the artistic flair of Leo and the peace-loving nature of Taurus, making these folks really into having beautiful and harmonious homes. Libra is a Venus ruled sign and is likely to be interested in living in a place that is pretty trendy or stylish. They are pretty social people, but generally when people have the fourth house here, they like to maintain their home as a safe haven to go after socializing. So living close to a place that they like to go often is probably a good move. Libra is this kind of like balanced sign. So they sometimes, same with actually all of the air signs, kind of have a this or that quality to them. So even though Gemini benefits from reading, if they could only sit down, and Libra, like they're very social, but like they gotta go home. So yeah, it's kind of paradoxical about this placement, but they definitely need this place to be beautiful and stylish and also quiet. Oh, and they're likely to listen to music a lot when they're too. So Scorpio fourth house. Scorpio in the fourth house is a placement that is, they really value privacy. And it's a place for them to rest and return to themselves. So Scorpio is a highly mystical sign of death and regeneration, making this placement, like people who have this placement tend to build altars or have some sort of like really meaningful objects. It's not quite as functional as Virgo, but still as that importance is there. So of the signs, this placement is likely to want to have like a generally witchy home. Like they tend to, they're okay with having maybe darker objects in their house, like some skeletons or antlers or something. Because again, death. People with this placement are also more willing to live in a spooky old home and tend to be a big fan of like antiques, like weird stuff. They are also more willing to live in gritty environments than other water signs, but are still pretty sensitive. So I have a Scorpio fourth house, and I can attest to all of this. And also, especially the last part, like I have a high tolerance for living in like a neighborhood that's like loud or has a lot of stuff going on. But when I moved to a quiet place, I was like, whoa, that does make a difference, you know? So there's a tolerance, but it's not necessarily like a thriving. And now we have our Sagittarius fourth house. Sagittarius fourth house people are similar to Gemini. They have a penchant for adventure, and paradoxically, they might feel most at home when they're on the road and like pretty far away from home, because Sagittarius rules other cultures and traveling and like going outside of your comfort zone. So having your comfort zone be outside of your comfort zone is kind of a funny thing. But when they do settle in a location, their homes are havens for learning, novel experiences where peace and diversity are valued, and they tend to have interesting objects from like all the places that they visited. Having an outdoor fire pit or a large fireplace is a subtle but important feature for this placement. It's like a very kind of like mutable fire sign, so they do well with having physical fire in their environment. They would also be well served by yard space where they can play outdoor games with their friends, because this tends to be a pretty physical, kind of like sporty fourth house placement. These people are probably frequently on both sides of Airbnb, because, you know, they're leaving and they're, you know, traveling. And another thing about Sagittarius fourth house people is they tend to have had parents or like grown up in a home, if it wasn't their parents, where they were really exposed to like weird stuff. Like maybe they had like hippie parents or parents that traveled a lot or something. That's what I found frequently with Sagittarius fourth house. Their minds were expanded at home. Capricorn. So Capricorn is ruled by the planet of time, Saturn, giving people with this placement a love of things that are old. Although Capricorn is an earth sign, its symbol is the sea goat, giving people with the fourth house placement a traditional but kind of whimsical sense of decorating, which lends itself really perfectly to antiques. Similar to Scorpio, people with this placement are likely to be excited about living in an older home and probably gravitate towards like austere tech Victorians and stuff. They also really value safety. So an old home that is safe is probably important to them. And they tend to like go for more austere architecture, as I said. So maybe not like a super kooky old Victorian, but like a more buttoned up one. Um, Aquarius fourth house. So this placement is ruled by the planet Uranus, who is zany, unconventional, and modern. As such, these people tend to appreciate modern and even unpredictable features in their home. So these like this weird staircase and these like blobby windows, like that's very Aquarius fourth house. Uranus is also associated with electricity and lighting. So if you don't have the budget for like a crazy Dr. Seuss house where you can have like this like really expressive architecture, then expressing your creativity through lighting is a definite way that you could do that. So indoor lighting, there's lots of cool light fixtures out there that are easy to install and take down. And then also garden lighting is another way to kind of be dramatic and subtle at the same time. Anyways, these people also tend to have a lot of plants and pets too. And now we have Pisces fourth house. So this is potentially one of the most sensitive of all the placements. Individuals with this chart signature have an acute need for a safe haven that is free from conflict and outside obtrusion. Similar to Scorpio, the home is highly spiritual place for them. So a heavily wooded front yard would suit them really well because then they can feel like they're sort of like shut off from everything and in their little cozy Piscean cocoon. Another subtle but uplifting feature for them would be to have an aquarium. Because you know they're a water sign and they're the fish, and it doesn't need to be like gigantic, but just even having a little fish bowl could be nice for these people. Similar to Aquarius, this sign also tends to have a lot of plants and animals with an added dash of door beads and crystals. So there's kind of a little bit more of like a hippie flair to this that's somewhere in between like Capricorn and Aquarius, right? It's like vintagey, but a little whimsical. And now we're going to talk about beneficial transits for buying a home. So one of the best times to buy a home is when the planet Jupiter is forming positive aspects, which is a trine, a sextile, or sometimes a conjunction to your fourth house. So I'll explain that really quickly. A trine is when when a sign is 3 signs away. So we've got the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So say Jupiter is in Gemini and your sun is in Libra. That is a trine because it's 1 air sign away. So if you had an earth sign, it'd be 1 earth sign. You see what I'm saying? So that's a trine. A sextile is when it's 2 air signs away. So that's 60-degree angle. So 30 degrees and 60 degrees. Those are the beneficial angles that you're looking for. So you want Jupiter to be those angles away from your fourth house. When I say conjunction, that means that Jupiter is on top of something, and it depends on what is also there. So if Jupiter is in your fourth house, but it's conjunct Saturn, that adds some complication, but we won't go into that. So Jupiter transiting your fourth house is a great time to move generally. So when Jupiter is forming a sextile or a trine to your fourth house, it's not necessarily going through it, which is a transit. When Jupiter is going through your fourth house, that is a great time to physically be moving. So the trining and the sextiling, that could be a good time to be buying. But when Jupiter is in your fourth house, it's very, very beneficial. So another one that is beneficial is Jupiter trine or sextile your natal Venus. So before I was talking about the fourth house, which is that area at the bottom of your chart, which is what we've been talking about the whole time. Venus is not a place in your chart, it is a planet. And for everybody, it's in a different place. So you'll have to look at your chart to figure out where that is. But when Jupiter is in a trine, that 30 degrees, or a sextile 60 degrees away from your natal Venus, that is also a really great time to buy a house, because Jupiter is luck and expansion, and Venus is our resources and assets. So they're having a beneficial relationship in that regard. And this indicates good fortune in getting a price that you can afford. Another thing to look out for that is helpful is the transiting sun or moon conjunct your natal Venus or Jupiter. Conjunct means, again, on top of. So if the sun or moon is on your Jupiter in your natal chart or your Venus in your natal chart. If it's both, holy mother, that's great. But this enhances the likelihood of a successful and pleasurable interaction when it comes to real estate. And next, we're going to talk about ones that, if you can avoid them, great. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world. And those ones are Mercury retrograde. We've all heard of it. It's not the end of the world, but it is just a time to think and to go over things. The rule of re's. So like research, reread, rehash everything. So you're going to want to triple read your contracts before signing and making sure that everybody's terms mean the same thing. Because when you say something, just because it's in writing, you might mean a different thing than what I said. So making sure that we agree on terms and reread everything. Another one to try to avoid, again, if you can't avoid it, it is not the end of the world, is Venus retrograde. This happens not as often as Mercury retrograde. But when this does happen, it's really important to try to not buy at the edge of your means, because what often happens with Venus retrograde is we'll buy something and be in a good place to buy it, but then something will change and then we won't anymore. So it's important to make sure, if you're buying in a Venus retrograde, that you have a safety net. Don't buy like right at the tip of what you can afford, because it might not be the best decision. Let's see here. Also, hard aspects. These are squares, a 90-degree angle or an opposition. That's 180 degrees, so opposite, or a conjunction sometimes, meaning on top of the planet Saturn or Mars to the fourth house. So if Saturn is making a square to your fourth house, or Mars is making a square to your fourth house, this can give a sense of restriction or aggression. So just things not kind of flowing super well. Doesn't mean you shouldn't buy, just means you need, it's like checking the weather, right? If you see that it's going to rain, that doesn't mean you can't leave your house. That just means you have to put on a raincoat, So just have that in mind. Bring your patience, and keep your eye on the big picture when those things are happening. And then last, Jupiter square your natal Venus. So this can go either way, honestly, but what often happens is we can feel really positive, but in a kind of impulsive way. And we might do something that we then later kind of like look back on and be like, oh, I wasn't totally sure about that. Like when Jupiter is square Venus, we're likely to get like super hyped up about something and then later kind of feel less hyped about it. So again, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It just means know yourself, and if you're an impulsive person, like make sure you've checked out all your options. I hope this is helpful. That's pretty much what I've got. If you would like to follow me on the socials, I have an Instagram. I'm Sidnoria7. I also have a TikTok that I try to use. I'm astrologies. And then I have a website, 7 Stars Tarot. I give personal natal chart readings and tarot readings. I also teach classes and do events. So let me know. Oh, also, I'm a personal stylist. I love styling people and their homes based on their chart. So that's called a Venusian consultation if you want one. That's all I got. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Wow, I never heard of a Venusian consultation. That's awesome. There's a lot of things I haven't heard of or learned. So that's why I love having new people, because then I learn new things.
Yeah.
That was super interesting, Sydney. I was like following along and trying to see, where my house is, what is in my fourth house. The other thing I wanted to share is, so like in thinking about, you were saying like times to avoid or times when it could be really great to get into a house or
Mm-hmm.
move, even you said. So the way people would look that up is the same as the natal chart, but they would look at like their current, or what is it called? Their current chart?
So, okay, I actually just realized that I skipped over something. I'm sorry. So that I live in astrology world, so sometimes I forget. But what you're going to do is you're going to pull up your natal chart and actually, you know what? I'm just going to show you guys how to do it right now. I'm
That
going
would
to go
be
to
awesome.
astro.com and I'm going to give you a tutorial. So, I'm going to share screen again. And we're going to go to, so I already have a profile, so mine's going to look slightly different from yours, but I'm going to go to user
We
profile.
can
Here's
see
my
your whole
chart.
screen if you just wanted to
That's
share.
okay.
Yeah, just
Um,
you want to
I
make it a little
can't,
bit bigger,
oh yeah.
or will
Let me
that? Yeah,
bloop,
there
there.
you go. Okay.
Okay, so this is my chart. You're welcome. Just kidding. So I just clicked this button right here with transits. And now, as you'll see, there's green planets on the outside of this. That is what I'm talking about. Like so right now the moon is conjunct my natal Jupiter. That would be a great time for me to buy a house. And let's see here. Venus is conjunct my natal Uranus. But that actually is not a great time to buy a home. So things like mitigate themselves. But as you see, let's look at something that's forming another. So if you look in this corner, see these green things? This is showing you different transits that are different transits that are happening with the current transits. So let's see. I have Jupiter squaring my natal sun. So that would not, that could potentially be an okay thing for me. But if it was squaring my natal Venus, I wouldn't want to do that because I am an impulsive person and I know that about myself. So I would just be aware of that, you know. But if I had Jupiter here, say my Venus, so actually my natal Venus is here. If Jupiter is right here, that would be a great time for me to buy a house, or right here because it's at 30 degrees and 60 degrees away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
helpful. It's helpful to
Yeah.
have the visual.
So Jupiter is crawling towards that point for me. So when it's here, whoops, that'd be a great time. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that'd be a great time for me because it is going to be, yeah, 30 degrees away from my, from my Venus, which is in Aquarius. So that is a good way to kind of get an idea of how the stars right now are affecting your blueprint of like who you are. That being said, there's another type of transit technique called a progress chart. And if you get your progress chart read, that's actually even more accurate than getting your natal chart read. So if you are really serious about using the stars to help you, buy a home, I recommend having an astrologer do your progress chart because that gives you a very clear snapshot of where you are right now. I didn't talk about that today because it is pretty in depth. It's not for beginners. But basically what that technique does is it scooches all of your planets up to where they are now. Because time didn't stop moving, right? Like the planets have moved in space from where you were born, and that those placements reflect time more accurately now. So your natal chart reflects your character, where you're like your fixed character, kind of like your genetics, like, but your body and your psyche change as you age. So your circumstances too. So that the progress chart is the most accurate way to get a snapshot of your current circumstances.
And the progress chart, is that based on like today, or can you look into the future and say like what it's going to look like in 6 months or 1 year?
What you do for a progress chart is you take the day that you were born and then you tick your chart up through 30. So I'm 33 today. So I would take the day that my chart when I was born, and then I would move the planets 33 days. So I would click 33 times for the planets to move. And the moon moves really quickly. And so does the moon and Mars move fairly quickly. But what happens with when we look at that chart is it gives more information on the moon, and the moon is really important for timing, for personal timing. So that is what you do. You literally just scooch it up for however many years alive you've been. So if you want to look into the future, you can. If you want to see like, oh, should I buy a house when I'm 67? You can. You can scooch it 67 days after you were born. This is a man-made technique. I don't know how it works. It's completely fascinating. It absolutely blew my mind and made me feel like a wizard when I first came across it, but I can't explain to you how it works. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's see if there's any other questions that people have.
Okay, how often does your chart change? Your chart changes, uh, it depends on what planet you're talking about. So sorry, I'm plugging my computer in because it's dying. Within our lifetime, our sun sign generally changes 3 times. So I'm an Aquarius. That means that I will be a Pisces and an Aries, most likely. So if you're a Taurus, that means that you are going to become, sorry, so rude. My computer's not behaving. Thank you for your patience, everybody. If you're a Taurus, that means you're going to become the 2 signs after that. So that is something that happens to everybody. However, if you have a slower moving planet, like Saturn moves every 28 years, so it doesn't always change signs for people. Sometimes people have Saturn in Aquarius their whole life. But if you have any slower moving planets at the end of a sign, so like 28, 29 degrees, those people can change like outer planets in their lives. And that tends to be a big deal. It doesn't happen to everybody. It does happen to some people, and it's not a big deal. So I actually have Saturn has changed signs in my life, and that it was pretty evident in the timeline of my my story. Does that answer your question? So every planet is different because they move at different paces. So the sun through Venus changes about 3 times for everybody. But Jupiter onwards, it's a bit slower. I'm sorry, Saturn onwards, it's a bit slower. And those all change at different frequencies. I'm sorry, I'm not a computer and I can't tell you like because they all have different timings.
It's okay. We don't have to have all the information in our brains because that's what
Yeah,
we have technology for.
indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just saw the question.
Yeah. Do
So
Mars and
do
Jupiter stay fixed?
um you mean in your progress chart? So no, Mars moves signs because Mars moves pretty quickly, like Venus. And that will change in your chart. Jupiter also will likely change yeah, it will because it moves in a 12-year cycle. So that one will progress several times. So yeah, the best way to figure this out is to look at how long the cycles are of each planet, and then looking at like the average human lifespan. Because yeah, it's not guaranteed, unfortunately, but so most humans live around 60 to 80 years old, so they will see the sun will change signs in their life 3 different times because it takes about 30 years for the sun to move into each different sign. progressed chart wise, not in a, this is what I'm talking about. It's an advanced technique. Yeah. So, as far as like that technique where we scooch the day forward, that you will only, your progressed sign will change 3 times in your life because of that. I hope I'm not confusing you. You're asking me really complicated questions. If someone wanted to chart their transits to educate their home buying progress, where should they start? Really good question. I would get an app, honestly. There are a few really good ones. Time Passages is pretty great. I'll type that in the chat. Time Passages. That was written by astrologer Stephen Forrest. And another one that I like, but it is a little bit more advanced. I can barely use it. It's called hold on. No, it's called Time Nomad. Time Nomad. And that one is very intense. It will tell you every time the planetary hour changes. If you want to get really, really, really nerdy about buying a house, you can buy your house on a beneficial day, hour, and minute. Because each day is ruled by a planet, and that day starts on the planet that is, sorry. So say you're buying a house on Thursday, Jupiter day, great day to buy a house because Jupiter is lucky. You're going to want to buy a house on Jupiter day at Jupiter hour and potentially Jupiter minute, which you can look up. This app will tell you, hey, it's Jupiter time. So you could plan your life according to that. I personally am overwhelmed by that and can't live my life that way. But if you want to, it's available to you. And that brings me back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is that astrology is a tool you can use if you want it. It is not like some dire prescription. If you bought a house and it was Mercury retrograde, like it's not the end of the world. Same thing with Venus retrograde. It's just something you can do to help you prepare and plan and make sense of what's happening around you. But if, for whatever reason you have to buy a house during Venus retrograde, or like you have an amazing deal and Jupiter is square your Venus, like just use your better judgment and have it be a resource instead of something that gives you anxiety. Because when we do get like super too deep into something, it can keep us from living a little bit. So I just want to have that caveat. Astrology is fun. It's also useful, but it doesn't need to be scary or like anxiety inducing. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great reminder.
Yeah.
I've had clients buy homes during Mercury retrograde. I actually had a client and she was like, okay, I don't want, like, let's wait to look at houses until this season passes. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, that's great. I respect that decision. And then there were just a few houses that kept popping up that she really wanted to see. And she's like, okay, it's fine. Well, let's just like go see them, but we're going to be really cautious and like thoughtful about it. And so, um, yeah, but I also think it's super interesting to like be able to look into your future and see like if there's a better time, right, for you to be thinking about it. Because then you can plan. I like for my clients to plan as much as possible. And so like it's just another tool, right, for them to say like, okay, go talk to a lender, figure out your finances. And then also if you want to like look at your astrology, you can do that too and see what that says.
Yeah, and it's like it's not really that different from planning a trip, right? Like if you're going to Mexico, you're probably going to want to go like when it's cold where you live so that you can like, same thing with astrology. Like if you're going to buy a house, it's cool to look like when the stars are good, but it doesn't mean that you can't go to Mexico in, the summer. Like it's just going to be a little more hot. I don't know if that was a good analogy, but yeah, it is a tool for planning that you can kind of get an idea of what the energy is going to be like, instead of just like flying blind. And not to mention, so it can be good for seeking out beneficial transits. It can also be used for finding tools when you're not in the most beneficial transit. So like as we were going through my chart, I was like, oh, that's good, but that's not good. You can lean into the good energy and be like, okay, I might have like Mars squaring my fourth house, but I do have Venus sextile Jupiter. So I'm going to make sure I'm like really charming and kind and not aggressive, because that is my charm. That's my luck in this environment of hostility, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So many people are living with other people, right? Or they're buying a house with somebody else. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any thoughts about that? Like, do they all look at their charts, or like, what do you think about that?
That is a great question. What I would do for that, it depends on how enmeshed they are. If they are like friends that are choosing to live together, actually for both of them, I would do both. But for friends, it makes more sense to do a sync. What's it called? Oh my Lord. Hold on, my brain just farted. There's two different types of charts. There's a composite and a synastry. So a synastry chart is when you overlay two charts on top of each other to see who this person is to that person and who that person is to this person, et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of just plop each other on top of each other and see where the pieces lie. That would be good for moving in with a friend or like an acquaintance. And what you would do is you would look at the aspects between your fourth house basically, and like you would want to see how you guys live. So actually I used to live with my best friend. We're not well suited to live together. We love each other, but we have super different needs, and actually similar needs. We both need creative control. And I love maximalism and she loves minimalism. So that was a problem, you know? So looking at, you know, what the flavor of the fourth house is, what the different planets aspecting the fourth house are. So say somebody has Mars square the fourth house, they might be more aggressive at home than they are anywhere else. You know, that's just something important to keep in mind. So like, and not taking it personally, you know, it doesn't need to be like, oh, we can't live together. It could be like, oh, well, if you are kind of like aggro, like I know it's not about me. This is like how you are at home. Not saying anybody gets a free pass, but like we can have more information about how to meet somebody where they are. The other thing that I would do, especially if it's for couples, is a composite chart. And this is done when we, instead of plopping both charts on top of each other, we find the midpoint of each of the planets in those two people's charts. And what this does is it gives you the alchemy of that particular relationship, because we are different with every single different person. We're not the same person ever because we're interacting with other people's energies. So a composite chart is almost like a new person. It's like who we are together, each like energetically. And that makes more sense to me for couples because they're more energetically linked. And what I would look at the fourth house for that too. But especially for couples, I would look at their synastry and their composite, to see what they're bringing to the table as individuals, and then also what their couple identity is, and like what the value between that is. I've never done that in my personal experience. I wish that I had. But I didn't know about astrology when I was cohabitating with a partner. So next time.
You put it on the list. Okay. We need to know what the rent is
Mhm.
and whether we will be good based on astrology. I love it.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
another thing that you're going to want to look at is the moon signs. So, people with really different moon signs might struggle in a living environment. That's my roommate Rachel. Luckily, we have
Hi,
compatible moon
roommate.
signs. But somebody with like a Taurus moon might like really want to come home and just like watch TV, but somebody with a Gemini moon might want to come home and talk a lot, you know? So having just understanding what each, because the moon is also associated with the fourth house. The moon rules the fourth house. So it's where we like feel the most cozy and comfortable. Actually, I just realized that I misspoke in my presentation. I said that the fourth house was ruled by Taurus. It's not, it's Cancer. So oops, it's exalted in Taurus, which is not the same thing. But that's why we look at the moon to see how people are at home, because the moon rules the fourth house. Does that make sense?
Yes. As
Okay.
I look at my chart.
Yeah, so I have a moon in Gemini, so I am a person that likes to go home and talk. And then I like to go and be by myself because I have a Scorpio fourth house. So we all are kind of like an interesting mixture of things, right? Like nobody's just like, I am the most textbook Sagittarius ever, right? Like we have a beautiful swirling of contradictions, and that's why we're so lovably complicated, you know? Like astrology. It helps you see all of the ingredients in our flavors.
Yeah, I love that. My moon is in Pisces.
Okay, and you have Scorpio fourth house, so moon in Pisces. You probably like moon in Pisces people are very stressed out by conflict in their house. I mean, who isn't? But like an Aries moon is more likely to be like, step off, biatch. You know, a Pisces moon would be like there's just, and nobody likes conflict, but everybody responds to it differently. And Pisces moons tend to be very permeable. It's hard for them to be mad at people because they understand where they're coming from. So it can be hard to hold boundaries and like keep that separate space. So it's important that they are with people that assume the best in them and are generous.
Cool. Anyone else
Yeah.
want to put where your moon is at? Let's see.
Where's yours, Danielle?
Taurus.
Taurus. Oh yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, Taurus moons. Um, yeah, they tend to be pretty okay at holding boundaries, if it's not afflicted. But they like to be cozy. They tend to not like a lot of activity. Like if they go home and like there's a bunch of stuff happening, it can be a little bit overwhelming for them. Like if they came home and there was like a big project going on, they'd be like, ah, you know, whereas a Gemini moon would be like, cool, what's going on? Or like even a Sag moon. Does that track, Danielle?
Yeah, that tracks. It made me
Okay.
think of this time when my partner and we had agreed that we were gonna switch closets, but we had never talked about when we were gonna do the big project. And I left the
Uh,
house and I came home and he had started like undertaking the project, took all my clothes and the hangers off, thinking he could just like grab them and move them. Didn't work out. It
uh,
was like all over like the room. I was like, wait, why? I thought we weren't doing this yet. So yes, this tracks.
wow, a little
I
close
had
to home
another
there. Sorry.
yeah, I'm like flashbacks. I had another question. You had given us some app recommendations. Are there any apps that you don't recommend?
Oh, yeah, actually. All right. I hope nobody gets mad at me. I don't like hold on, I'm pulling up my apps folder because I have like all of the astrology apps because it's my job to keep abreast of these things. I don't like CoStar. I think it's snarky and reductive. But it apparently does have some insights occasionally. It just told me happy birthday. Thank you. Yeah, today it says notice the glimmer on the horizon that's calling you elsewhere. What? No, that's not relevant. I don't even know. And it doesn't reference what it's talking about. It doesn't give you any reference to like okay, so it's saying Mercury conjunct Mercury. I wouldn't interpret that way. Yeah, I think it just kind of like it seems like AI is telling you some random shit, honestly. So that's my hot take on time passages. But I'm sorry, not time passages, CoStar. It is interesting. Like it's entertaining, but I would not use it as like a planning or predictive tool or anything that's like very profound. One that I do find to be triggeringly accurate is the pattern. That one is good. It is a little bit heavy-handed on like romance stuff though. I wish they would talk about other things. And then I love time passages, although the Chani app is amazing. Sorry, you were talking about which ones I don't like. But yeah, mainly it's CoStar. And then time passages I also love, but it is not, there is synthesis required. It doesn't just like spit something at you. It tells you what things mean and you have to piece it together. So if you want to learn, time passages is a really great one. If you want to get a lot of meaningful guidance, the pattern is really good. And if you want to be entertained and have something to talk about, CoStar. Yeah.
That's great. I love your hot
Yeah.
takes. I love Chani too. I actually first got into astrology like maybe like a year or so ago.
Mhm.
And somebody told me about the Chani app and it's been really interesting.
I have to say, she did an amazing job. Like, I don't understand how this woman figured out how to be such a freaking boss. Like, she's just like, I don't know, it blows my mind. But yeah, the app is designed very well. It is like it includes a lot of stuff. Oh, also, if you want to get into Vedic astrology, which is a little different, there are other apps. Align 24 is one that I use. But it's very, very in depth. I think that's what's called. Align 27. I'm so sorry. Align 27. That one's for Vedic astrology, and it's pretty intense. And then also Moonly. That one you do have to pay for though. And it will give you your Vedic astrology chart. That is not something that I can talk extensively on because I'm a Western astrologer. I would like to one day be a Vedic astrologer, but one thing at a time.
And what does Vedic astrology mean?
Vedic astrology is the astrology that they use in India and basically like the Eastern astrology community. And it is technically, I think, more accurate. Well, it uses the current planet. I am not 100% sure on the differences, but hold on. I think I have one. I have one. I can't explain it to you. Just a moment. I have a write-up of it. Just a second. Thank you for being patient. I feel like this is always happening to me. Get support. Okay. So the Vedic astrology is basically like nope, wrong one. Nope, it disappeared. Okay, well, they do different planet calculations is essentially the short answer. And it's potentially more accurate, but that for me, I don't think that it is less accurate as a prediction tool, or like I don't think Western astrology is less accurate as a prediction tool because we have been using these symbols to correlate with for a really long time. So it's just a different symbol system. This isn't science where like every tool needs to be like gone through some rigorous like how am I saying this? Multiple tools can be used to achieve the same thing. Like you're all arriving at truth, but from a different lens. And Vedic astrologers and Western astrologers converge on a lot of stuff. So it's not just like a bunch of phooey, it's just a different way of interacting. In Vedic astrology, your chart isn't a wheel, it's a grid, and you look to different places for different houses in your chart have different weights than they do in Western astrology. And yeah, I haven't looked far enough into my Vedic chart to decide whether or not I agree or disagree with it, but I know many Vedic astrologers that are like really good and can, nail people pretty easily. So I think both are worth exploring. In my experience, Vedic astrology is a little bit more I don't want to say condemning, but it's like things are more like negative or harsh. Like they're more willing to interpret things that way than in Western astrology, but that's because they're really trying to use it predictively. So in Western astrology, it's often used kind of as a psychological tool, whereas I feel like in Vedic astrology, it's frequently like, okay, but when should I open my business? You know, like
Cool. Thank you.
I hope I explained that well. I probably didn't, but feel free to roast me, internet.
I mean, we are not 100% experts here. We are just sharing information and knowledge, and everybody can go to the internet and find more information. Or, of course, contact you, Sydney, for any of the services that you provide, that you shared earlier, follow you on Instagram or TikTok. And yeah, I loved that. I loved our conversation. I thought it was so interesting and I learned so many new things. And I just think it's a really interesting tool that people could use if they want to, or if they don't want to, that's fine too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks. And
Yeah.
maybe we'll have you on again to talk about many of the other topics. I know you were talking about there's a way that you can map out your home based
Mhm.
on your chart and like so potentially in the future you can talk about some of those things.
I would love to talk about local space charts. I'm a total nerd for it. But thank you so much for having me and for listening to me ramble about things that I both know a lot about and things that I don't know that much about. So,
And have a good rest of your what do we say? Your return,
my solar
your
return.
solar return. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy solar return.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.